Hello and welcome to the Colts Cover-2 Podcast. I'm Joel Erickson. I'm joined, as always, by Nate Atkins. This is the First Impressions edition. You are getting it as we drive through the New Jersey Turnpike and back into New York, where we are flying out of JFK. Colts lost today. Colts lose 45-33 in the NFL. Colts somehow found a way to give up 45 points to a team that couldn't score more than 20 in most of its games this season. I don't know. I'm kind of at a loss for words on what to do with that game. I think the biggest thing is, in the short term, it means this team is definitely not making the playoffs. They've officially been mathematically eliminated. In the long term, though, the question is this loss bad enough to prompt Jim Irsay to make big, GM, head coach level moves with the franchise?
Yeah, this loss reminds me a lot of Jacksonville in 2021. I was just a few games into that, into covering the Colts. It just moved here mid-season, and they go down on the road to face a team that was in line for the number one pick, another team that had 2 wins. It felt like there's no way they'd lose it. Not only did they lose it, but they got smacked around and decisively lost it. Same thing happened today. The exact same thing happened going on the road against a 2-win team, a team that's lost 10 in a row, a team that had not scored as many points in the past month as they put up on the Colts today. Like, that's inexplicable as how many, maybe inexcusable is a little bit more apt, because there's a lot of reasons for it, but none of them are remotely acceptable. So it's the kind of loss that's so out there, so damning, that it does, like, any change that you can suggest for this team, I think pretty much any change has to be on the table, has to be considered, because it was important. This year really had 2 goals to me coming into it. One of them was making the playoffs, because they were a 4th down play away from it last year. Very manageable division. Rolled back. If you're going to do the run it back thing, you should be able to, the idea is to take a small step forward at least. So they didn't get the playoffs. And the other one was to build positive momentum with Anthony Richardson, get that moving in the right direction, develop Anthony Richardson. That certainly has not happened either, for a few different reasons. And so when you're trying to build this case of hope and faith, hope for the future and faith in the current pieces and pillars, I think what we'll probably get into some on this podcast, probably a lot more in the next one, the coming, is really where these 3 pillars are, being Chris Ballard, Shane Steichen, and Anthony Richardson. This is about as hopeless as that connection has ever been, and about as hard to build faith in as you ever could imagine, being at this spot, just the end of really the first full year for Anthony Richardson as a starter, just at the end of year 2 for Shane Steichen after what year 1 brought. But it's the end of year 8 for Chris Ballard, and so that's why things are at this point where you do have to ask that, and it's a big wild card. We're going to guess on it, some speculate, wait on it mostly, because until we hear from Jim Irsay, we don't really know where the wind is blowing. But I think this combination of this kind of an inexcusable loss, repeating some of the losses of the past, with going back home next week for a season finale against the Jaguars, where I think you're going to get a real pulse of how checked out this fan base is, and deservedly should be at this stage of where things are. That's usually the stuff that gets to owners, is when it's a really unexplainable performance on the field followed by fan apathy. That often leads to changes. So I think any of that is very much on the table right now.
We'll get right into the categories. We'll start with villain of the game. The Colts lost today, so it's obviously villain of the game. I'm going Chris Ballard. Ballard, everything Ballard said about his defense came up small today. He said that the cornerbacks or the secondary would be fine without making any changes, because they were more experienced. 2 of those 3 guys at cornerback weren't on the field. One of the guys he brought back, Julian Blackmon, despite injury history. I think most of us probably thought Julian Blackmon should be back unless they get upgraded safety. I would have liked them to have upgraded at safety. But Blackmon really struggled. He's been battling a shoulder injury all season long. And you could tell when he tackled today. Malik Neighbors had 7 catches for, I think, 171 yards.
2 touchdowns.
Kenny Moore did not play well. But anyway, he said that secondary was going to be fine. It was not today. It's a truly terrible Giants passing offense, for being honest. And he also said that the pass rush would make up for it. And the pass rush did nothing. Absolutely nothing. Not even DeForest Buckner. So on top of that, plus you feel like they probably counted on the linebackers to provide tackling. They didn't tackle. Like the defense is Gus Bradley's, and he deserves a significant share of the blame. But this is also Ballard's baby in terms of what he's built. He tends to get more excited about defensive picks than offensive picks and signings. And it collapsed against the absolute worst team, worst offense in the NFL.
Yeah, it was horrific. Today was just a real exposure of the roster, a lot of parts of the roster, and the supplementary parts on offense, I think you can throw in there a little bit. Lack of running backs who can catch passes. We saw that expose Jonathan Taylor, just some of the pass pro issues. But it was, maybe lack of, certainly the A.D. Mitchell pick has not panned out. Had another tough day today so far. But yeah, the defense is sort of like he 8 years to draft and develop. Got more than $100 million in new contract guaranteed money this offseason to that defense. It cannot perform this way. So I'm going to kind of stick in that area, but I'm going to go with the secondary as my villain of the game. Just because today was the day I thought, like all season long, they've kind of gotten by. They've sort of, maybe skated. They've exceeded the expectations we had, which were pretty low because of just how they rolled back a struggling secondary from last year. They were very thin in certain spots, not a lot of difference makers either. So it kind of felt like they were in a tough spot, lacking depth. And they mostly, for the most part this season, they've not been the problem of the defense. They have mostly held their own. Today is kind of when the dam broke, though. We're picking one area, so it's very much tied to an underwhelming pass rush, which honestly, if you're talking about expectations and resources, that's probably a more fitting villain. But I just want to focus on the secondary today because we haven't really made them like the actual villain. They haven't been the problem. They just haven't been a solution in many other games. But today they were the active problem. I mean, they went up against a backup quarterback in Drew Lock, and he's never in his career had a game like this. 17 of 23, 309 yards, 13.4 yards an attempt with 4 touchdowns. He also scrambled for a touchdown. So he ended up scoring 5 total touchdowns and had 6 incompletions. I know one of those incompletions was just a flat drop on an uncovered receiver. So really, coverage-wise, they didn't match up with players. Certainly Malik Neighbors. They didn't tackle when they did have those opportunities. Malik Neighbors toasted them. Julian Blackman, I mean, that tackling has been hard for him all season long. Today it really came to roost when those other guys weren't doing it. And then, like you mentioned, Kenny Moore, today just showed you how much he has had to cover up this season. He's done overall a very good job. But he's not a perfect player. Very few are those types that never have an off game. And today was a real off game for him, tackling in coverage. And the result of it was the secondary was just atrocious. Some bad run fits in there, but the main issue was the just covering, having any chance against Malik Neighbors. And then even, there just were some backbreaking moments. The 32-yard touchdown to Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson getting as wide open as you could imagine on a touchdown. They converted when they had to convert. Like they just they couldn't contest anything for Drew Lock. I'd have to look here at the full stats. I don't know if they got a hand on a football today. I mean, it's hard to find anything the secondary did at any moment that was remotely good enough. And again, they went up against a backup quarterback, a team with one wide receiver who is awesome, but he's a rookie who is questionable, very unedged to even play today, and just not much else to go up against. And just it was just one of those days where, like, in the pass rush, it's where it felt like Jacksonville a couple of years ago when that pass rush wasn't getting home. Secondary got picked apart. And, today was the day that, like, I always kind of felt like whenever they would get to this point of their season being over as far as the playoffs go, we would eventually talk about the secondary being the thing that held them back. It was a big difference. And again, it hasn't for much of the season, but today was a chance to win a game and stay right in that mix. And I just thought they crumbled.
Yeah, a really bad day for the secondary. We've talked a lot on this podcast over the last year about all of the things they didn't do secondary. Just laid it out pretty well, like why a lot of those things were bad. Our two things work together in that way. We'll very quickly do hero of the game here. I'm actually going to kill Unsung Hero and do a backup villain of the game. We did that one time last year.
Yeah.
We're going to do it again today. But there's hero of the game. We actually have some of these because somehow they were still in this game and they had no business doing it. I'm going to go Alec Pierce. I don't have his numbers in front of me since I'm driving.
6 catches, 122 yards, and a touchdown.
Plus a 44-yard pass interference. He probably would have felt like he had to come down with it, but I actually think that the Giants player reaching out and taking him down is what caused him to drop it. He wasn't upright. He was trying to manage falling and catching at the same time. He still probably want to have it, but they got the yards. Yeah, Pierce, and then his touchdown catch was great. That could have given him a chance to tie. He was really good. Alec Pierce was really good. I'll give him here of the game. I'll let you have the other one.
Yeah, there's 2 guys that kept them in this really narrowly, and it was it's 2 wide receivers on the outside. It's Alec Pierce, probably his best game, at least since maybe that Houston game. He went absolutely nuts to start the year. Jacksonville was like that. But today was like
he had volume too.
Just volume today really is what kind of brought it all together. And helping out your backup quarterback, that was a huge thing today. Is I thought that if there was ever a world where they would not win this, we'd be saying, no, it's because they couldn't pass. Well, they did. They threw 330 yards and 8.7 yards per attempt because of Alec Pierce. And then my hero of the game, which is Michael Pittman Jr., 9 catches for 109 yards and touchdown on only 10 targets. So that's the sort of efficiency and high volume and clutch play that has often eluded Pittman this season because, as we've laid out many times, he's been dealing with the back injury all year. He got a lot worse in week 5. And there have been some games out where he looks like he can just barely kind of skate by, and you're just hoping to get a couple of catches in key moments. So today was a lot of those 9 catches, 109 yards, some key conversions, and a gorgeous touchdown as well that pulled them within 2 points. That was the last score that they got. And it was like if they could have ever gotten a stop, maybe one of these guys makes the play to help win, to go out and win the game. They lost because of all the villains we laid out. But those 2 guys just really laid it on the line in a game where all of a sudden the Colts had to score a lot. And, backup quarterback. And this was their best. This was outside wide receiver wise. This is the best game of the season for those 2 guys working off each other. And, just a shame for those 2 laying it on the line to not have the chance to beat a team that scores often as few as the Giants. And today, that's not how it went.
Let's go to backup villain of the game. This is what we do, and the game is so bad that, frankly, we don't want to give it to anybody else. We don't want to give any more heroes out. Backup villain of the game for me, I'm going to go with Gus Bradley. It's been remarkable this season how they've struggled so bad against the bad offenses they've played. They've been better against good teams, but this is inexcusable. Everything that happened today is inexcusable. The Giants don't want to start Drew Lock even a little bit, and he had 4 touchdowns, 5 touchdowns. He had 5 touchdowns. 4 throwing, 1 rushing. For a lot of reasons, I think Chris Ballard probably is more responsible for the defense than Bradley. But Bradley's hasn't been able to rise above it. They haven't done it. Plus, they also made the move with defensive line coach that hasn't really paid off at all. So, Gus Bradley, I don't think I have to make this case very hard. But in a game where your defense absolutely tanks against the worst offense in the league, your defensive coordinator has to get mentioned.
Yeah, it's just crazy how they've, like you said, they've the same defense that for 4 quarters made play after play after play after play. Denver can't make any plays today at all, and it's largely the same guy just a couple weeks later. So my backup bill in the game is the defensive line, like I just hinted at. That defensive line was built to be the anchor. So for as much as we harped on the secondary, the lack of depth, the lack of an impact player, their model was, hey, we're just going to put everything into the trenches, as Chris Ballard says a million times. The defensive line was going to be the difference. They brought in Latu as the first defender taken in the draft to be that, day one kind of game sealer, game record type guy off the edge. They brought in a new defensive line coach, Charlie Partridge, because even though they finished top 5 in sacks, they thought, we didn't get the consistent pressure we wanted to go with those sacks. We wanted to end games. Everything was built around them going from last year top 5 in sacks to being like the best defensive line in football. It was lofty, but that was how they built it. It's a high bar, but they're not anywhere close to that. They're not. I don't even know if this is an above average unit. It certainly wasn't today, because they went out there and Drew Lock dropped back 23 times. Not only was he not sacked, he was hit one time. One quarterback hit. And that's against, if you follow the Giants have a ton of problems, of course, but the number one storyline you'll hear about outside of quarterback is offensive line. They have just whiffed on so many offensive line investments. Evan Neal was a famous one on the right at right tackle early in the draft, but it's just not panned out. They mixed and matched there. It's kind of like that Patriots game where it's just like, talk about like Gus Bradley defense, or just the defense in general not match up well with bad offenses. It usually goes right to the defensive line, where when they have a matchup, they should just kill, and they don't really do anything. I just didn't really understand it. I can't think they had 2 tackles for loss today. It's just hard to think of any of those guys that did much of anything. Like even DeForest Buckner, hard to remember a moment he had today. Latu missed a very bad tackle, early in the game. As much as I kind of really noticed him, he had a rush too far on one of the touchdown passes that Drew Lock had. It's you talk about inexplicable. I don't understand how they struggled in that matchup of the game as much as they did.
Yeah, they only have 34 sacks this year. They're going to finish probably 10 sacks or worse, but behind where they were last year. I know they had injuries. Buckner missed a lot of time in the first half of the season, but they were supposed to be able to overcome that. They haven't. Very worthy. Unsung villain of the game. Who do you have for unsung villain?
For unsung villain, I'm going to go. So the offense did pretty well today, and so it wasn't really about. They picked some things with the run game. There's something there about not having the mobile quarterback that didn't run as well. Just one run for Jonathan Taylor that broke for 26 yards, and he averaged 3.9 on the day. So there's a little bit to nitpick for that. And, and I didn't love, one sequence from him game management wise, I didn't love as far as, they ran it on 3rd and 8 up the middle to try a 54-yard field goal when Matt Gay has struggled as much as he had from long kicks. So there's a little bit from the game I could go at. But the main thing for me was this week, I kind of explained it when I was talking about the 3 pillars. This week kind of tested the big question I thought was there for the 3 big pillars. You hit on with Chris Ballard, his roster construction, the way he just rolled it back and bet on certain guys that got exposed. Anthony Richardson, his durability, his ability to stay on the field, and deal with hits, that was exposed. And for Shane Steichen, it was the leadership. I just thought this was a tough week for that, where your quarterback is, we don't know that he's out until he's dealing with anything until we get out there on Thursday, and he's not at practice. We talked to Shane on Friday. He's missed a whole week of practice, and Shane just words it as just soreness. Said he's just sore. We'll see. Might play, might not. And then it turns out that he says, it comes out. We get from a team source that it was back spasms. Just no reason to say that it was soreness. If that's what's going on, I just thought it was sort of absent-minded as far as the context involved with a franchise that's been through so much with quarterback injuries, a fan base that's dealt with that, with a quarterback who tapped out of a game and said he was tired and got benched for 2 games right after that, scolded for that. Like, he's facing those questions, and some of them he's earned and brought upon himself. And this one, though, if the guy's legitimately injured and he has back spasms, which there's different severity to back spasms, but there's some of those that are very, very serious and unpredictable. And so I just didn't understand why he couldn't come out early in the week and say, hey, Anthony Richardson is dealing with some back spasms. It's unpredictable. I don't really have updates beyond that. We'll see how it progresses. And then, and even say, like, he really wants to be out there. but we're being careful with him because that's our job. That's all that ever had to be said. Instead, I thought he just kind of put his quarterback in another bad position as far as kind of him facing this fight that really isn't about – it is about him to a point where he's got to prove he's durable, and that's why I said I thought it was a bad week for him in that way, but not in the way that it ended up playing out of making it about – when you just say soreness, it comes off as if he just doesn't want to be out there, or he just can't hold up to basic NFL hits that aren't an injury. Just introduced a lot of issues, and I just thought that it's one area I really thought Shane could have learned from with how the benching went, the messaging with the benching. That was the time I'd said kind of first controversial moment Shane had to talk through and learn from, and I thought at the time there were some lessons he learned about that role as a head coach and a messenger and a leader standing behind certain decisions. I just thought that this is kind of like we're talking about faith and belief in the future, and some of these pillars kind of growing and learning from the areas they need to grow and learn from. I thought this was a bad look for Shane this week.
Yeah, one of the things, like, there's just a simple way to look at quarterback. Like, you have to get more information injury-wise. It's just kind of the way it goes. I know when I covered the Saints, Sean Payton hated to give out injury information. If Drew Brees was hurt, he would generally be very open and honest about it, just sort of recognizing the situation. It's something that Shane doesn't recognize as much. Like, his explanation today was he prefers to keep things close to the chest, which is true. He does not like to put a ton of stuff out there, much to our chagrin. But you kind of have to with the quarterback. It's just the way it works. So I think that's a good one. My unsung villain of the game is Brian Mason. 100-yard kickoff return. I actually looked it up. I kind of kicking myself for not realizing this, but the Colts are pretty bad against returns anyway.
Yep.
They're in the bottom quarter in both punt and kickoff, and that's going to go down after that 100-yarder. Just not having a great season. It's a second year as coordinator, new kickoff rules. Can't have a play like that happen. There's down and kind of had a little just right out the window as soon as the second half started. So that's my unsung villain. That brings us to number of the day. Do you have a number of the day? This is going to be hard for me.
I do have a number of the day, so maybe you can try and brainstorm as much as you can do while driving. Mine is 2015. That's the last time the Giants scored this many points in a game. It was 9 years ago. This is not only the worst offense in football this year, it's pretty much been the worst offense for a decade running. They've been entrapped in this deal. They drafted Daniel Jones. Clearly did not work, even though they tied themselves to it. They had a brief break with Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones for 1 year, but mostly they've had, since the loss of Odell Beckham, or when they moved on from Odell Beckham Jr., Eli Manning got old. Like they just have been one of those franchises that never has any offense. So today, to come out with a backup quarterback, the offensive line, the state that it's in, a late round rookie running back, Tyron Tracy, nice player, don't get me wrong, but most points they've scored in 9 years. I thought that pretty much sums up why we picked all the villains and backup villains that we did today. Yeah,
that's a good one. I think mine's going to be, no, I can't remember exactly what the number is. I was going to go with 14.6 or 3 or whatever it was that they were averaging as an offense.
Yeah, it's in the 14s.
So we'll just go with that. And, I already said this, but they'd only scored 20 points 4 times all season. They're on their third quarterback. I don't know how to drive it home. I'm driving. I can't come up with a great off-the-wall number. We'll just skip it off. We are going to get to the interlude. We are going to do the interlude. That's going to be really hard for me to remember. I had my 3 football things that gave me joy. I'll see if I can remember them. The good thing about football things that gave me joy is that they're not tied to the big picture. They're usually little plays. But we'll start with game day observation. My game day observation is simple. I was expecting a rain game and didn't get it. Supposed to pour today. It's clear, very clear, all day.
Clear once we got there. I'm talking about the drive-in.
It was very foggy.
So foggy.
It was much rainier yesterday. When I was here and Nate was sort of here.
Yeah. Yeah, I had another crazy travel day. Got here late and it was pouring rain. So, yeah, it cleared up a ton today. It was a very, very nice, kind of warmer day. And that's what my game day observation was. I wanted to see the planes, and there were no planes. I was going to make this whole segment. We were going to go for a half hour breaking down the planes flying the banners across MetLife Stadium. That it's been happening every home game lately here for the Giants, begging the Mara family to clean house on the Giants front office, head coaching staff. I guess maybe a little bit of irony that the week that they can't show up, the Giants go out there and they drop 45 points and knock a team out of the playoffs and all of a sudden look like a very functioning team. But
one thing about Lucas Oil's roof, can't fly planes.
You can't.
Not
so
effective.
That's a harder way to get that message through. I saw there was a plane with that same kind of message about the GM at the Jaguars game. So other places aren't catching on with the little plane with the message thing. But I don't know. I just wanted to. I knew like it's our second trip to MetLife. Last time we did it against the Jets, we kind of made it all about this kind of odd feel of a stadium. So can't really get back to that well today. So
It's still a terrible stadium.
It is a very weird stadium. Looks like I said this last time, looks like Area 51 for the outside. Does not look like a place where there'd be football, but it is open air, so I was hoping to see those planes fly over, and I don't know. I guess we'll have to do that whenever the next time we're here.
Okay, here we go. 3 football things that gave me joy. 3 football things that left Nate terribly vexed. The number 1 football thing that gave me joy. I like it when fumbles are shot out of a player's hand like a bottle rocket. I can't remember. Was it Tyrone Tracy?
I think so.
A Colts player, maybe it was Zaire Franklin, got their helmet on the ball. Colts didn't recover it. But the ball shot 15 yards. And that's fun. It's fun. That's what football things that gave me joy is for. It's for fun things like that. That was fun. It was weird.
That was fun. Did not end up in the Colts' hands. That would have been it's like a hot potato moment. That ball didn't bounce their way, and I guess that set up a bit of a tone for the day. So first football thing that left me terribly vexed is when just any time that a pass catcher's not happened once with Jonathan Taylor and a throw out of the flats. Just it felt like he was supposed to turn into the hot read. He did not know the ball was coming then, and he explained it as he's mostly trying to clear out space, but it's also you should have some, obviously if you're the hot read, you got to know that. If not, either way, there should be some ability to read that, I don't know, some way to know that a ball is going to hit you just right square in the shoulders, and it just that came at a moment when the Colts were really, really struggling, and it just sort of summed up that this plan today may not quite go the way that they wanted.
And every ref on the field terrified. And I think it's hilarious. It makes me chuckle every time. I think it's great whenever a penalty is so obvious that referees who aren't even supposed to make the call are like, oh man, I gotta throw it just in case somebody else does it. And they all kind of descend on the same place. It was very good accuracy from the referees. But yeah, anytime every ref on the field tries to throw their flag, I think that's pretty fun.
Huh. That was hilarious. I'll just double up on, since we're on the referee theme, the second football thing that left me terribly vexed. Just whenever a referee turns on his mic but is completely unprepared to speak. Happens once a game, and it's just very funny. Today it was announcing something about the 2-minute warning, but it came out as the most sort of jumbled thing that I've heard announced at a press spot at a stadium before. So it's just sort of I don't know. It's their jobs are kind of tricky at times. It's just let's collect ourselves before we turn that mic on, and let's get it on kilter here.
Public speaking is hard, Nate.
It's
difficult. Number 3 football thing that gave me joy. I had something for this, and I cannot remember it to save my life. Might just go with Is it bad to say kickoff returns for touchdowns? Is it bad?
I mean, as a general thing, I can see enjoying that. Today is maybe not something Colts fans enjoyed.
We don't see those much anymore because no one returns kicks.
Yeah.
But it's one of the more exciting plays in football. So I might just throw that out there. Kickoff returns for touchdowns. They need to. Let me throw this in there with the dynamic kickoff return. I need them to make the touchback further out next year than 35, so there's more incentive to make the guy return.
Yeah, I mean, I remember us talking about for as much chatter as there was about the dynamic kickoff rules, it's not felt dynamic, almost never gets returned out. It's always like, what's the real upside of this? And then all of a sudden you have a play like that tells you, like, well, it can still happen. Crazy thing, I didn't feel like he was even touched. So that
wasn't. I looked.
To me, felt like the turning point moment where it was like, oh, maybe they will not get all the way back in this. Football thing that left me terribly vexed. Number 3. I'm just going to kind of make this general, but when a team that is this experienced, this, supposedly good at playing together as the Colts defense is supposed to be, this highly paid, just stops tackling the team. That's happened too many times this season. There's been moments where they've gotten back to it, but today I thought was the worst tackling game this season.
It's up there. There have been so many that have been bad that it's hard to remember, honestly. This was tough, and I thought Zaire Franklin actually summed it up quite well. When we've asked all season about it, it's been something they've beat around. But when you have a game that sort of brings a little bit of finality like this, you tend to get a little bit more raw answers. And he said that he just felt like guys have tried to just look at tackling as a one-on-one experience, not an 11-on-1 experience. And somehow they, in the course of this, lost the entire point of running it back and having continuity is playing together. And you do see that with, we brought up EJ Speed a lot as a guy who's been in the spot, but today I saw some others with whether it was Samuel Womack, Kenny Moore, and Julian Blackman in moments like this. Like they're trying to just sort of like lay one big hit, wrap up, and at least just sort of like, if you don't make the tackle, hold him up, like affect the way that he's running, slow his momentum. Like there's just a lot of guys just kind of flailing out of nowhere just to try to, like, it's like I get him or he's going to score type of desperation. And I don't know. Maybe it was sort of being punched in the mouth that played into that. But again, like you said, it's happened at times all year. It's very strange to have this experienced of a coaching staff that's worked with these players who are most of them out there. They're not young players. But they're not ancient players either. It's just like tackling has just evaded them. And it really is their defensive problems. A lot of times can be boiled down to something as simple and fundamental as that. They don't tackle well. When you don't tackle well and your defense gives up completions, and your defense is supposed to be built on stopping the run. If you don't tackle well, like all that stuff starts to just go away. So I thought today was kind of and maybe it's not the worst game, but it felt like the rock bottom as far as, especially the moments those missed tackles came. Just felt like every time they need to get off the field, someone would miss a tackle, and then, or like a decent play for, you're supposed to make the Giants drive on you, decent play would turn into, an explosive play. So just weird to see a defense that's done this for so long together just stop tackling. They do a terrible job of wrapping it. It's like a very simple thing, but it's also just true. It's bothered me all season. There's a lot of hits that are delivered with the shoulder. No one grabs cloth. And we kind of joke about this in the press box a lot, but I'm famous for kind of saying, I don't care if I get run over. I just care if the guy falls down. I'll take, like, if it's between me falling over and looking embarrassed, if he runs me over and lands on top of me, but he went down, I care more about that than delivering a blow and letting the guy keep going. So, tackling's a good one. That's the 3 football things that gave me joy. 3 football things that left Nate terribly vexed. I couldn't come up with anything other than kick returns. We're going to stick with that. I promise I had something during the game. It will never come to me again.
Almost like the joyous game choose the game.
There was some joyous stuff in there. There was some fun. It was a game where a lot of weird stuff happened. That's usually fun.
Yeah, it's weird.
I'm surprised you didn't bring in toss plays in short yardage.
Oh, but you see, like, it was set up. It just dropped. Like, and actually, I didn't mind that. Wait. Sorry, I thought you were talking
there was
about
one sequence where the Colts ran a toss play on 3rd.
Oh,
and
yes,
Jonathan
yes.
Taylor did get across the line. And then the Giants had a 4th and 1. ran a toss play,
Yeah.
and also got stopped.
That's a good one. I thought you were referring to the 2-point play. The lateral was.
I almost said that. In fact, you know what? That'll be my third football thing that gave me joy. They ran a hook and ladder. It should have worked. There was a damper at the end of the joy when JT dropped it, but hook and ladders are fun. They're very, very fun.
Yeah, the toss plays is a good one. I had not that slipped my mind in the course of this, but yeah, it's just like you have an inch to go and you found the longest possible way to get there, and did not work so well for the teams doing that. But both of them tried, so that did not go well.
That brings us to too much blame, too little blame. Nate, is there anybody who's going to get too much blame for this game?
Jeez,
I was going to throw out Joe Flacco.
I think I don't even know if Joe Flacco will be a talking point.
I know. Well, the weird thing is, just this is behind the scenes. He went to go do his interview, and almost always there's a ton of reporters in there. It was just me and a couple of New York people. And really, I went because we need video of him for the Star. And it was kind of weird asking him questions. Like, I know he threw 2 interceptions. The first one was bad, but like the last one was kind of like a nothing burger because of when it wasn't a game, and they also wouldn't have been in it if he didn't have 300 and something passing yards. I don't know. I thought it was a fine performance for a backup quarterback. They scored 33 points, like against a team that hasn't scored more than 29 points all year. You would think that would win.
Again, our issue when we've criticized Joe his last 3 or so starts he's made is that like there just was not really anything to point to have faith that they weren't scoring touchdowns. They weren't efficient. Today they were 33 points and almost 9 yards in attempt. So that's what's kind of damning about the whole. One of the main things that's damning is that you would have thought that they lost because Joe Flacco, is 39 and just doesn't have it, and they had to go to back quarterback. That was not the issue. It was everything on defense and then situational moments on offense. I guess for me, if I have to really stretch and pick up with someone getting too much blame, I mean, it's probably not for this game, but just give a little bit of credit to Kylan Granson. He's had a tough season, mostly a bad season. We've made him one of these villains or tossed him into that with his tight end room. I thought very clutch 4th down catch for him to extend that drive before the 2-minute warning or before the end of the first half and get them within 1 score. If he didn't get that, that's where it feels like it was going to slip. Again, it got erased, basically got erased on that kick return touchdown anyway. But I thought he had some nice plays when they got him in space to convert on 3rd down. So I'm sure he's not getting blamed today, but it's just that's another damning moment is that tight ends, they've sunk them this season. That group actually kind of, not the group, but certainly I thought Granson in moments, 3rd down and 4th down, that's what you look for to have tight ends. They haven't done it this year. He did it today. It just, for other reasons, did not pay off with anything.
Too little blame. Who's getting too little blame for this? I have Jim Irsay.
Okay.
So this is a complex situation a little bit because you drafted Anthony Richardson with the idea that you were going to develop him and really see how long and try not to get off the exit for a while and really stick with it. But that's complicated by the fact that when you fired Frank Reich, you did not fire Chris Ballard. So Ballard is 8 years in with just 2 playoff berths. And Steichen and Richardson are in their 2nd year, and there's some people who could argue that you should give Richardson and maybe by extension Steichen, because the new coach is going to feel the same way about it, another year. But that's what happens when you go half measures with stuff, is you get in these weird situations like this. And we said this at the top. I mean, I think anything is justified with what they're going to do, with what Jim Irsay decides to do. But you could have seen this coming. You could have seen this coming when you're going to pick a young quarterback where you put a situation where it's like, oh, we're kind of at the end of one era, but we maybe wanted to see how this other one played out. Like, you just kind of put yourself in a bad situation.
Yeah, and that's why things are quite as blow it up feeling as they are. Is that if you reset it, if we're at year 2 with a GM, that you spent a year cycling out players like he hasn't had many drafts to do this with. It's a totally different field than a GM that's in year 8, especially with everything we laid out on defense. Draft and developed for 8 years, and this is like the product they put out there. So too little blame. Which one I was going to go to? I'm trying to think, like, yeah, I'm struggling with that one. I feel like everyone's getting
lots of blame.
A lot of blame.
Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah,
he's getting a lot of blame.
He's getting a lot of blame. I guess I'll circle this in just to, it doubles back on one of the villains, but I feel like it was easy to forget today with how many guys on defense messed up. But we can go back to Latu for a moment. Just like this is the type of game where, yes, there are a lot of problems on defense. Like no one gets a pass on that side of the ball, but just one or two times you needed somebody to make that play that got the ball back quickly, that got a big sack that could affect field position, sack in the red zone that turns could have keep a touchdown and turn it into only a field goal. It felt like with the way their offense played, getting enough, getting some good plays from Jonathan Taylor, even though it's some miscues, the way Joe Flacco played, those wide receivers, like the right change of possession at the right time. We're still criticizing this team, but they're still alive. If they could have done that, it just too many times this season it's felt like when their defense is really struggling, like Latu, that's the type of guy that gets you out of that. It's like, okay, you're not tackling really well. You're having a hard time. You're giving up a lot of completions. The edge rusher, one play, they're supposed to be able to change that, and that's what he was drafted here for. Again, it's putting a lot on a rookie. That's what they chose to do. But you are the first drafted edge rusher, your first drafted defender at a premium position. The profile was the reason they took him over maybe some other edge rushers that were highly touted was he was supposed to be the most ready to step in and do it. And it's just been really hard to find a lot of impact from him. And it's one thing when it's not impact, but the defense is playing well. But today they needed like that. They needed one play. They needed one play against a bad offensive line and a backup quarterback in a game to get them the ball and get a change of possession. It's eluded him a little too much this year. So we talk about the defensive line pressing. I think the biggest area to me of why that's the case is Samson Ebicom had 9.5 sacks last year, and they lost him, but Latu steps in, and it has just not been anywhere near the impact or production of that spot. That Leo spot is very much supposed to be that type of position, and I thought today was just very glaring on how they banked so much on the defensive line, but especially this guy they took number 15 overall, first defender in the draft, and we just haven't seen those plays he was supposed to make.
That's a good one. One to throw away. My one to throw away is that Jonathan Taylor doesn't have value. I don't know if anyone's saying that completely, but he's had such big mistakes. I think that people are out on him. And I get being out on him as far as like this season, but this is still a guy with 1,254 yards. I think the biggest thing is if Jonathan Taylor is on a better team and they've built stuff around him where he doesn't have to be in passing situations much, where they don't have to rely on him for everything offense. Not that they did today, but where it doesn't feel like they have to worry about him. Like, he's got flaws for sure, and some of the mistakes have been glaring in critical moments. But it's still a useful player. It's still a very useful player to have, and there's not a lot of running backs like him. So that would be mine, is that you can still use Jonathan Taylor to great effectiveness, even with some of the issues in his game and some of the mental mishaps that he's had this season.
Yeah, I think it just goes to show that, like, for as great of player as he is, he has some flaws, but they can't overcome it if he has a big mistake or even like a medium mistake. It's just like there's just not enough else in the offense that's going to lift them up. It's going to be the playmakers, the skill players that are healthy and getting the job done, or even on defense, playmakers in general. Jonathan Taylor's, he's made the plays lately, and then when he doesn't make the plays, you really feel them because he's got to be the guy making them. So that's a good one. I guess mine to throw away, I'll kind of stretch this in a different way, but the Colts need to throw away the run it back mentality. Like, we've been saying that, but today I think showed it. I don't know as far as big changes, what's going to happen. It's not, we try to stay away from just saying like this person has to go, or this, like, in terms of like big faces getting fired. So I will just say that, like, however they go about it, whether they do a reset at GM, whether they talk themselves into not doing that because of the quarterback experiment, the run it back mentality cannot work anymore. So certain things like bringing back a guy like Julian Blackmon just because he's been here, I'd apply that to a lot of free agents. I'd apply it to other guys on contracts that, I don't think you should be at all afraid to move them in a trade, and especially try to upgrade when you have a chance to do that. We brought up some other franchises that have done this. Quick example, the Lions had a good running back, touchdown machine in Jamal Williams. They wanted more than just a guy who scores in the goal line. So they went and they signed David Montgomery, and they took their run game from very good to the best in football. That's got to be more the mentality that's here. It's not just bring back guys because, this GM drafted them. They play well as a group. Like, we're seeing none of that pay off. And in fact, I think it's become a weakness on defense where you just run so many things back that I think some guys have gotten complacent. I think defenses know exactly how to, or offenses know how to attack you with the strengths you have to avoid, the weaknesses you have to exploit, and they're not taking any advantage of that supposed chemistry and continuity when the tackling is what it is, and they're not wrapping up and they're not playing together, and the pass rush is not built off one another. There just hasn't been any benefit to it. There's no reason to keep doing it. You cannot just keep rinsing and repeating here. So whatever the changes are they make, whether it's a ton, whether it's a few, whether it's, more, not necessarily a ton of people losing jobs, that mentality of we're just going to re-sign people because they've been here before and that's what we do here. That's been a problem for Chris Ballard. It's been a problem for Jim Irsay. I've always said, and we've always said, that's pretty much a shared vision of team building from them. It's gone way too far. It's not helped. It's not worked. And that this has become the group collectively that has had these games late in the season, chance to go to the playoffs, and not gotten it done, whether it was Jacksonville 2021, Houston last year, New York now. We're just like, there's no reason to keep rewarding a group of players that's not getting it done the way that they are. So I hope that is something we're not going into next year talking about the same way.
One to go on. This is tough because, like, I want to go on something with the future, but I don't necessarily feel like, without talking to Jim Irsay, we have not heard from him nearly as much this season as we usually do. I don't feel like I have a good handle on it. My one to go on is just going to be that there's no easy answer at quarterback for the immediate future. I think you can make a case that you stick with Richardson. I wrote yesterday for this morning that, they're still trying to figure out all the stuff that he struggled with before. But if you look at the options that they're going to have and where they're picking, they don't have good options there either. So considering it's a thin draft class. So I think the quarterback problem is it's going to be here almost regardless of what happens with the head coach and the GM and everything like that.
Yeah, I'll kind of build off that and just say my one to go on would be the questions that you had for the three main pillars of this franchise are going to go on. They're more extreme than they were to begin the year, than they were to begin last year. So as we head into next week, into the offseason, as we wait to see what Jim Irsay is going to do, the questions that you would have if you were pushing back on any of these three are very out there, very, very loud. With Chris Ballard, it's too much loyalty to his own players, overeating his roster, being afraid of not having that willingness to strike on premium players. All that's there, the complacency that comes with that. With Shane Steichen, it's some of the leadership and the messaging that's come there. Also, I think you can pull in he's an offensive coach. Does he understand defense? That comes to light with the way that they've kind of just kept the coaching staff and what they've done there, switching out a defensive line coach when that was not the problem. And Anthony Richardson, like you brought up, durability, that certainly is a huge question. The passing, we certainly have not gotten answers. So it's like whatever. Next week's game is inconsequential.
That's it for the Colts Cover-2 Podcast. I am Joel A. Erickson. That was Nate Atkins. Thank you for keeping us company as we made our way back to the Long Island side of New York so we can fly out of JFK tomorrow. Who knows what's going to happen with the Colts heading into next week. We'll have first impressions from all of it, from next week's game, and from whatever happens at the end of the season.